I'm finally getting settled both mentally and physically. It happened 3 years ago. I would be happy if you could listen to my story. First of all, let me give you some brief details. I'm 30 years old, and my wife is 28 years old. We have no children. We met through a mutual friend, and we got married about 2 years after. My wife is a housewife, and I was a salesman at a small local company. I'm talking about a small business. It's a small company with less than 20 employees. We run the business among old local acquaintances. The president is about 30 years older than me. He is a friendly and energetic old man. He has been a one-man operation since he founded this company. I feel that everyone is following him because they are in love with his personality. And here comes the main issue. Around February 3 years ago, I had a strong sleeping spell and I fell asleep on the sofa. I'm sure many people have fallen asleep on the couch with the TV still on. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then, I noticed that the number of times I fell asleep like this gradually increased. It became normal for me to fall asleep for 2 to 3 hours after dinner. My job is in sales, so it wasn't easy. I thought, maybe I was just tired. I would fall asleep like this about 3 to 4 times a week. It was just too frequent. I suspected I was sick because I would fall asleep regardless of my own will. I had a memory of seeing a TV documentary I once saw that talked about a person with a brain abnormality who falls asleep even when he or she is not trying to sleep. So I thought I might have the same kind of disease. Of course, I had talked to my wife about it. You know how I've been falling asleep a lot lately? It's happening more often. Do you think I'm okay? I asked her. My wife would always say,
"You're worrying too much. You said you're busy with work. Maybe you're just tired. I'm a stay-at-home mom now. When I was working, I used to go home and go to bed."
She replied optimistically, seemingly unconcerned. This made me even more worried. It's my head, so maybe it's neurological? Maybe I should go to the hospital. If nothing is wrong, that would be a relief. When I said that, my wife said,
"Don't make such a big deal about going to the hospital. You're just tired, not sick. I'm sure they won't be able to find the cause, and you'll be sent around to various places. They'll just trip you off for the cost of the tests. It's a waste of money."
She was worried about money. I was a bit surprised at her vigor, but I was busy with my work. I thought, well, that's just the way it is. Oh well, it will get better in time. But after about 1.5 years of living like that, suddenly I started to feel that my wife's food was terribly bad. Her spaghetti dinner tasted bitter or astringent, like it wasn't food at all. Something is wrong with today's food. It tastes bitter. Are you sure you didn't use the wrong seasoning or something? I asked my wife.
"What? It's the same as usual. I used the same ingredients and the same recipe." "What? Does that mean my cooking is bad?"
My wife started to lose her temper a little. No, that's not what I meant. I was trying hard to put her in a good mood. I rushed to explain myself, and the situation was calmed down. But I still kept falling asleep, and something was wrong with my taste buds. I knew something was wrong. I decided inwardly to go to the hospital. Immediately after that, I was hit by an even more intense sleepiness than usual. I went to bed and tried to sleep. My wife, who was in a better mood now than I had finished dinner, said to me,
"It's a waste of hot water, so you must take a bath before going to bed."
She told me that. But honestly speaking, I didn't care about that. Please, just let me sleep like this. But my wife was trying to get me to take a bath that one day. Well, no matter how hard she tried, my sleepiness was stronger than her words. I didn't take a bath and went to bed immediately. I had established a rhythm of falling asleep right after eating and waking up in about 3 hours. It's 8 o'clock p.m. now, so I'll wake up around 11 o'clock p.m. I fell asleep thinking, then I can take a bath. But that day, when I woke up after falling asleep, it was bright outside. I checked my watch and found that it was 12 o'clock the next morning. I was lucky that it was a Saturday and I had the day off from work. But it was still strange to fall asleep like this. I was also feeling very tired and sweating a lot. I knew this was very strange. My resolve became stronger to decide to get checked out. I decided to go to the hospital, so I called out to my wife. Hey, I just woke up, but I went to bed around 8 o'clock yesterday, didn't I? It doesn't feel right, so I'm going to the hospital. When I told her that, she laughed again and said,
You worry too much. You were sleeping comfortably as usual. Maybe you just relaxed because you got a break after work on a weekday,
she said. I felt sad that she wasn't worried about me, but I thought to myself, I can't ignore my body's SOS, and went to the hospital without listening to my wife's words. I was afraid that it might be a brain disease. I went to a large hospital and explained the situation at the reception desk. I was directed to a general physician at first. I told the doctor what was going on. The doctor did various tests on me. They didn't seem to know the results right away. The doctor just said, "Come back in a week." After returning home, I somehow hid the fact that I went to the hospital from my wife. My wife was against me going to the hospital, saying I was overreacting. I felt she would be angry if she knew I had to pay for the tests. I was tired both mentally and physically and didn't have the strength to argue with my wife. So I decided to keep quiet until I got the results. I told my wife that I was just wandering about town for a change. Then, for a week until I heard the results, I wondered if it was a physical or mental disease. I didn't have much of an appetite and didn't eat much at lunch at work. I hardly touched the dinner my wife made for me. I spent the rest of the day in a state where I could not get through my meals. My wife said,
If you're tired, you need to eat a lot of food.
She tried to get me to eat, but I didn't feel like eating at all. A week later, I was so tired that I had no appetite and lost my strength. I went to the hospital with a determination that something serious must be wrong. The doctor told me that he was surprised to find a large amount of sleeping pills in my body. I was astonished. I had never taken sleeping pills in my life, nor had I ever been prescribed them. When the doctor asked me if I had any idea what I was taking, all I could remember was my wife's cooking. I remember that my wife's cooking had a strange taste. It tasted bitter and astringent. The night she fed me that, I felt even drowsier than usual. My wife told me to take a bath, but I couldn't care less and fell asleep. When I woke up, more than half a day had passed. When I told him this, the doctor's face began to cloud over. Given your story, it is possible that the food that tasted funny contained a large amount of sleeping pills. If you had taken a bath as you were, you would have quite possibly drowned and died. If you can manage the issue of cost, I highly recommend hospitalization for your sake, I was told. Hearing those words terrified me and my heart started to race. My wife was against me going to the hospital. She strongly recommended taking a bath after dinner. And the food she cooked tasted funny. I felt like it all clicked together. But if that was true, I didn't know why on earth she would do that. As I stood there stunned, the doctor advised me to move to a place where I would be with people I can trust. If not a hospital, then to my parents' house. or to someone I knew I could rely on. I think he was a really good doctor. I went home with a depressed feeling. I couldn't think about the future. But before that, I thought, what was my wife thinking? Was it really? I thought about it, but I didn't know the answer. After returning home, my wife tells me,
Welcome home.
"Oh, hey." I gave her a quick reply and retreated to my room. Then, I packed up the things I needed to live with for the time being. I went to the living room, and my wife says,
What? Are you going somewhere?
I decided to take a chance and ask her, "You didn't put sleeping pills in my food, did you?" I asked. Then, my wife replied,
Did you go to the hospital by any chance? I guess they found out.
She simply confessed. At that point, I was stunned beyond anger. I asked her, "Why did you do that?" But after that, my wife wouldn't talk to me. After more than 30 minutes of questioning, she finally started to talk.
In order to be with Mr. Smith, I had to do this. Mr. Smith and I love each other and want to get married, but we can't do it because of you.
Suddenly, she went crazy. I was so surprised that I ran out of the house and went back to my parents' house with all my belongings. It was a 40-minute train ride to my parents' house. When I told my younger brother and his wife, who live with our parents, who are over 6 years old, about what happened, everyone's mouth was agape. My mother seemed particularly shocked. Her face was pale and she was frozen. My father seemed to be more angry at first. He turned red and was silently thinking about something. My brother and his wife were worried about me, but they were thinking about what to do in the future. My brother, who often browses internet bulletin boards about cheating, says to me, "I think you should contact your wife with a lawyer in the future. You never know what she might do to you, and your life could be in danger. I think it's best to be careful." That is what he advised me to do. After that, on the advice of my parents and my brother and sister-in-law, I decided to take a leave of absence from work and stay at my parents' house for a while. My brother and sister-in-law took pity on me for my sudden return. They made various arrangements in the guest room to make it easier for me to spend time there. I was exhausted both mentally and physically that day, so I went straight to sleep. When I drank my mother's chicken noodle soup for breakfast the next day, I felt kind of relieved and started to cry. I cried and sobbed in front of my family. I think my mother was also crying a little when she saw me crying. After I finished crying, I felt relieved. I could taste my mother's cooking for the first time in a long time, as if I had never lost my appetite. I called my workplace after the weekend break. My boss, who knew what was going on, said to me, "You look really sick last week, didn't you? You barely ate lunch. You have a lot of unused paid holidays. Take as much time off as you want. If it's not enough, I'll talk to my superiors, so don't worry." He was very supportive of me. I was thrilled to hear that. This time, the president of the company called me and said, "I've heard what you said, so you can take a leave of absence until things are settled, but make sure to get it all figured out by the end of the year," he said to me. At that time, it was just before September. I thought I would follow the boss who gave me more than 3 months off for the rest of my life. And in my search for a lawyer, my brother, who had also gained a lot of knowledge from the message board, told me that he was going to find a lawyer for me. It was pretty easy to find one. The lawyer told me, "We have enough evidence to make everything go away." He said this about the sleeping pills evidence. He said that it was useful to have the diagnosis from the doctor and the notes I took off when I would fall asleep in the conversations I had with my wife. But even then, I can't be satisfied to just have the affair go away. My parents and brother said, "What she is doing is a crime. Let's fight it thoroughly." And then, for some reason, I was even contacted by my sister-in-law's parents about the matter. They also supported me, saying that if we didn't have enough money to pay for the investigation and legal fees, we could get some money from them as well. I heard later that my wife had returned to her parents' house during that time, so she lied to them about everything that was going on. She just told them that I was sick. In mid-September of that year, which I still remember, I had a direct confrontation with my wife. Originally, we were going to discuss at my lawyer's office, but my wife strongly insisted that I was too far away from her. It looked like the discussion was not going to go any further, so we had no choice but to talk at the apartment where my wife and I lived. At first, it was supposed to be just me, my wife, and my lawyer. My brother also ended up coming too because my sister-in-law was wary about what Alice might do. My brother, who had practiced kendo in elementary, junior high, and high school, brought a small wooden sword for him for self-defense. It made me laugh, but as it turned out, my sister-in-law was right. On the day of the meeting, we met 1 hour before the appointment with my wife. My brother was coming from his office, and my lawyer was coming from his lawyer's office. I arrived a little early, so I went into the house alone without thinking too much. When I got there, Alice was already at the apartment. It seemed that she had not hired a lawyer and had to come alone. When she greeted me, she was in a normal mood. She didn't say,
"Welcome home.
but she did say,
Would you like some tea?"
she was speaking to me normally. It was as if my wife, who had given me sleeping pills, was not really here. It was just that peaceful and relaxed in this room. But when my wife came out of the kitchen, she was not holding a cup of tea in her hand. She had a knife in her hand instead. Then she said,
"If only you hadn't been there, none of this would have happened."
She was mumbling and gradually approaching me. I was caught off guard, and when I saw my wife who had changed, I was so caught off guard that I couldn't move. Then my lawyer and brother arrived just in time. Seeing me standing there, my brother stepped in between my wife and me, and my lawyer pulled me back while I was frozen in shock. Then my brother held up a wooden sword and said, "You can either turn yourself into..." Then my brother held up a wooden sword and said, "You can either turn yourself to the police now, or you can come clean about the affair. If you attack me, I will fight back in self-defense," he said. My wife must have cooled down after hearing my brother. She chose the latter and put the knife on the desk. The lawyer kept the knife and asked my wife for information about her lover. The man was 40 years old at that time. He was apparently my wife's former boss. The affair had been going on for about 2 years. It started shortly before I started having sleep attacks. The man was married and he is at home today as it is his day off. My lawyer decided that we go to his house with my wife. His house was about 15 minutes away by car. We arrived there right away. I rang the intercom and a woman answered. I thought it was probably his wife. The lawyer stepped forward. "Are you the wife of Mr. Smith?" he asked her.
"Yes, I am. What can I do for you?"
She replied. The lawyer briefly explained the situation over the intercom. He then asked her to open the front door. When it opened, we saw the wife, who looked pale with surprise. She was quite beautiful and her stomach was large. I later heard that she was 7 months pregnant. My wife was also surprised at this. Apparently, she did not know that the wife was pregnant. She had heard that her lover and his wife were not getting along and that their divorce was imminent. After a while, the man came down from the second floor and asked, "What do you want?" He opened his mouth to speak, but he saw the expression on my wife's face and the man at the door, so he guessed what was going on. He then went silent. After that, I asked him to let us into his home to confirm the facts of the affair that I had heard from my wife. The lawyer exchanged contact information with man and the wife. and the discussion ended for the time being. During the discussion, the man tried to interject several times, but each time, the wife glared at him and silenced him. Alice was a full-time housewife, but when I think back on it, I remember that she often left the house on weekends to go out with friends. The man told his wife he was going to work on his days off and left the house. It seemed that he and Alice were meeting secretly mainly on his days off. The wife was unaware of the affair. She believed him when he said he was busy with his work. When it was time to go home, my brother suddenly opened his mouth and said, "Mr. Smith, who is more important than you, Alice or your wife?" He asked the man, and the man replied, "I love my wife, and I lust for Alice." The wife cried at his words. My wife was proud for some reason. The man quickly disappeared upstairs and left the discussion. The lawyer told the crying wife, "When you get settled down, I will introduce you to a lawyer. We may be able to help you. Please feel free to contact us." And he gave her a business card. Next, me, my lawyer, my wife and brother went to my wife's parents' house. My parents-in-law, who had probably been told something completely different, looked at me as if I was a demon when they saw me. When the lawyer explained all the facts to them, their faces turned pale and they apologized to me. My parents-in-law cursed at my wife, as if they were about to beat her to a pulp, and they promised to make sure that Alice would pay the alimony and my medical bills. My wife had been mostly silent up to that point, but toward the end of the discussion, she suddenly changed her mind.
The only person I really love is you. I know I did a terrible thing because I wanted to be cared for. Will you forgive me?
She started to say. She wanted to be with another man and wanted to kill me instead of divorcing me. I was terrified. I was about to throw up right then and there, and my brother rubbed my back. My father-in-law stopped my wife's words. Then he started beating my wife, who still wouldn't shut up. My lawyer stopped him, and the situation sort of calmed down. My brother was the last one to speak. "How can you say you love my brother after you tried to kill him twice? With sleeping pills and a kitchen knife? You should go to a hospital." When he says this, my wife became silent. My mother-in-law slapped her and said,
"They are right. What have you done? I am no mother to a murderer."
My wife was silent and depressed. After that, with the cooperation of my parents-in-law, the divorce was finalized in November. No property division, alimony plus medical expenses. I received enough money to buy a new car. My wife had almost no savings of her own. My in-laws had to collect money from relatives and borrow money to pay bills. The divorce settled things, but I was still in a state of emotional instability. I had flashbacks of getting drugged with sleeping pills and having a knife pointed at me. I developed insomnia and anorexia and eventually diagnosed with mild depression. Although the president told me I could take the rest of the year off, it looked like I would not be able to return to work under my situation for the foreseeable future. I called him to ask for my resignation. The president was concerned about my situation. "A long time ago, my ex-wife had an affair and I went through a tough time. I can understand your feelings a little. That's why I can't fire you like that." He said kind words to me. Again, the president's words made me cry. The president convinced me to take him at his word, and I decided to leave the company for the time being. On the other hand, Alice's lover and his wife were under a lot of stress. The wife had been hospitalized for a while because she was about to go into premature labor. After she calmed down after the baby was born, the divorce was finalized. The man paid me about the same amount of money as a small car. As for the sleeping pills, I don't know if he was involved in it or not. So I settled on that amount as the only responsibility for the adultery. After that, he and Alice got married. However, they were in a situation where they had no savings because of the alimony and child support. Alice started working at a nightclub to pay back the alimony money her parents had loaned her. But she had another affair there, and the man found out. So, they got a divorce. I heard she has to pay him alimony now too. 3 years have passed since then, and I finally got back to work, and my mind and body have calmed down. So here I am, reporting this to you all. Thank you to everyone who listened to my story. I apologize for the length of this message. Thank you for watching it. I hope you enjoyed it. We look forward to seeing you again. Please subscribe to our channel.